My baby sister stole $268,000 from our 87-year-old mother with dementia. She did it over 4 years, check by check, transfer by transfer, while mama sat in a house with no heat wearing two winter coats because nobody paid the gas bill. And she planned it. I found signature cards proving she set up the accounts 3 weeks before our family ever gave her power of attorney. Polly had the most beautiful handwriting in the family. Mama always said it looked like calligraphy. She used that calligraphy to forge Mama's name on 17 checks, 3 account transfers, and a document that would have taken my mother's house right out from under her. My name is Gloria Walker. I was 65 years old when all of this happened, retired after 37 years carrying mail for the United States Postal Service out of Baltimore, Maryland. By 2002, I'd been widowed 10 years and living alone in a little row house in Edmondson Village that I kept clean enough to eat off the floors. Not because anyone was coming to visit, just because that's how I was raised. I was the oldest of 5. If you know anything about being the oldest in a big family, you know what that means. You're the one everybody calls when something goes wrong, the last one to sit down at Thanksgiving, and the first one they call when the rent is due. I carried my family my whole life, and I never complained about it. That's not how Walker women do things. My son Curtis was 40 by then, living up in Philadelphia. Good man. Called me every Wednesday night without fail, and once a month he'd drive down to sit with Mama and read her the newspaper, even on the days she didn't know who he was anymore. Now, Mama, you need to understand what was taken from her to understand what was done to her. Ernestine Walker was a seamstress. She worked out of her home on Ashland Avenue in East Baltimore for 45 years. Wedding dresses, Sunday suits, school uniforms, curtains, quilts for new babies, you name it. Women from all over East Baltimore brought their fabric to Mama's front room. She had a Singer sewing machine she bought secondhand in 1962, and she was still running fabric through it in the 90s. The foot pedal was worn smooth from 4 decades of her pressing it. That woman could thread a needle with her eyes half closed and hem a dress so straight you'd think a machine did it. She charged fair prices, and she saved every dollar she didn't absolutely need to spend. For 45 years, stitch by stitch, dollar by dollar, she built up $280,000 in savings accounts, certificates of deposit, a small investment account, all of it at Liberty Federal Credit Union, where she'd been banking since 1971. I helped her open that first account myself, drove her down there on a Saturday morning, sat next to her while she signed the papers. They put both our names on it because that's how we did things. Mama trusted me, and I trusted that money would be there when she needed it. Every penny of that $280,000 was earned with her hands. No inheritance, no lottery ticket, no husband's life insurance policy worth anything, no pension because my father Raymond died in a Bethlehem steel factory accident in 1969 when I was 32 years old. Sparrows Point plant. They sent a man in a hard hat to the front door to tell Mama her husband wasn't coming home, just like that. One morning, he kissed her goodbye, and by lunchtime, he was gone. She had 5 children under the age of 15, a mortgage payment due on the first of every month, and a sewing machine. That's what she had to work with. That's all. And she made it work. She raised all 5 of us in that house. She fed us, clothed us, kept us in church and out of trouble. And in 1984, she made the last payment on that house on Ashland Avenue, owned it free and clear. I remember the day she showed me the letter from the bank. She held it with both hands like it was a diploma, and she said, "Gloria, nobody can take this from me now." She was so proud of that house, so proud. In 1997, Mama was 82 years old when the doctor told us what we've been pretending not to notice: early stage dementia. Some days she was sharp as a tack, remembered every birthday, every recipe, every grudge she'd ever held. Other days she'd call me by my father's name or stand in the kitchen and forget why she'd come in there. The doctor said it would get worse. He was right. So we had the meeting, all 5 of us sitting around my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in November of 1997. Me and Polly, Earl Jr., who was living in Northeast Baltimore and still working at the shipyard. Cheryl, who'd flown in from Atlanta, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. And Donnie, the baby boy, 29 years old and about to ship out with the Navy for an 18-month deployment. 5 Walker children, all in one room for the first time in years. And the only reason we were there was because Mama was slipping away from us. The question on the table was simple. Mama couldn't manage her own affairs anymore. Someone had to step up. Someone had to handle the bills, manage the bank accounts, make sure she was eating and taking her medication, and that the house on Ashland Avenue was kept up. What I didn't know, sitting at that kitchen table watching my baby sister dab her eyes with a tissue, was that Polly's husband Vernon had driven his used car lot on Pulaski Highway straight into the ground. The business was gone, and they owed the Internal Revenue Service $72,000. Their mortgage was behind. Their credit cards were maxed. Vernon hadn't held a steady job in 6 years, but Polly showed up to that meeting in a pressed blouse with her Bible in her purse, and she looked every one of us in the eye and said, "Let me handle, Mama. You've done enough, Gloria. You've been carrying this family your whole life. Let me take this one." She cried. I remember that clearly, real tears rolling down her cheeks, or what I thought were real tears. She dabbed them with a tissue and she said, Mama changed my diapers. Let me change hers." The room went quiet. Earl Jr. cleared his throat and nodded. Cheryl said it sounded like a good plan and started looking at her watch. Donnie just said, "As long as somebody's handling it, that's all I need to know." And me? I sat there looking at my baby sister's wet eyes and her pressed blouse, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Relief. Pure, stupid, grateful relief. Somebody else was going to carry the weight for once. My baby sister, the youngest of us, the one I'd walked to school every morning for 6 years, the one I'd taught to tie her shoes on the front porch of that house on Ashland Avenue, she was stepping up. I signed the power of attorney papers right there at my kitchen table, and I thanked God for Polly. That was November of 1997. For the next 4 years, Polly handled everything. She managed Mama's bills, drove her to doctor's appointments, picked up her prescriptions, dealt with the insurance paperwork. At least that's what she told us. I called Polly every week to check in, and every week I got the same answer. "Everything's fine, Gloria. Mama's doing good. The doctor says she's stable." I had no reason not to believe her. She was my sister. I visited Mama every Sunday after church, drove across town to Ashland Avenue, let myself in with my key, and sat with her for a few hours. I'd bring her the coconut cake she liked from the bakery on North Avenue, the one with the cream cheese frosting, and we'd sit in her living room and watch whatever was on television. Sometimes Mama would talk to me about people who'd been dead for 30 years like they were still alive. Sometimes she'd just hold my hand and hum old hymns. Those were the good Sundays. Mama seemed okay during those years, a little thinner, a little quieter. She'd repeat herself more, lose the thread of a conversation, call me by the wrong name. But Polly said she was eating fine. Polly said the doctor was pleased with her progress. Polly said a lot of things. Every Sunday when I'd pull up to Ashland Avenue, I'd see Miss Odessa Pruitt sitting on her porch next door. 80 years old, built like a firecracker and sharp as a blade. She'd been Mama's neighbor for over 30 years. She'd wave at me when I walked up the steps, and I'd wave back. Sometimes she'd say, "Your Mama's having a good day today," or "She was asking for you this morning." I'd smile, say thank you, and go inside. Miss Odessa was always on that porch. I think she lived on that porch. She saw everything that happened on Ashland Avenue, everything, but I noticed things during those Sunday visits. Small things that didn't add up to anything on their own, but sat in the back of my mind like a low hum I couldn't quite hear. Mama's house was colder than it used to be. The pantry had more canned soup and canned vegetables than fresh food, and Mama had always been a woman who cooked fresh. The television remote had dead batteries that nobody had bothered to replace. The hallway light bulb had been burned out for weeks, and nobody had changed it. One Sunday, I opened the refrigerator, and there was almost nothing in it. Expired milk, a block of government cheese, some leftover rice in a bowl with no lid. Mama used to keep that refrigerator full. She used to have greens and cornbread and sweet potatoes in there any given day. Now it looked like nobody was feeding her properly. I mentioned it to Polly. I said, Polly, Mama's refrigerator is looking empty and the house is cold. You want me to go to the store for her? I can pick up some groceries, maybe call someone about the heat. Polly waved me off. She always waved me off. I got it, Gloria. I'm going to the store tomorrow. You worry too much. She said it with that smile, that patient little smile, like I was the one being difficult, like I was the one who needed managing, so I'd let it go. Every time I let it go, I told myself Polly was doing her best. I told myself caregiving was hard and thankless, and I should be grateful somebody else was doing it for once. I told myself that Polly had her own family to manage, twins in high school getting ready for college, a husband who wasn't working. She had a lot on her plate. I made excuses for my sister because I loved her and because the alternative was too ugly to think about. That went on for 4 years. Then came February of 2002. I pulled up to Mama's house on a Sunday morning, same as always. And the street was quiet. Miss Odessa's porch was empty for once, too cold even for her. I let myself in with my key, and the first thing I noticed was the air. It hit me like walking into a meat locker, and then I saw her, my 87-year-old mother, sitting in her recliner wearing 2 coats, a winter coat buttoned up over a house coat, a scarf wrapped around her neck, gloves on her hands. Inside the house, I could see my own breath in that living room. "Mama," I said, "why is it so cold in here?" She looked up at me with those cloudy eyes and said, "Baby, I've been cold for days." I walked straight to the thermostat in the hallway. I didn't take my coat off. I couldn't have even if I wanted to, not in that cold. I touched the dial. It was turned all the way down. I turned it up, waited. Nothing happened. No click from the furnace, no hum of the blower kicking on. Nothing. I checked the unit in the basement. It was fine. The thermostat wasn't broken. The furnace wasn't broken. The gas had been shut off. Went to the kitchen. That's where Mama always kept her mail, on the little table by the window, where she used to sit and do her sewing. There was a pile on that table 6 inches high. Bills, unopened envelopes, collection notices, statements. 3 months worth at least, just stacked up and ignored. I started opening them. My hands were shaking, but I opened them. The Baltimore gas and electric bill was right near the top. Past due, 60 days past due, $147. That's all it would have cost to keep an 87-year-old woman warm in February. $147. And nobody had paid it. I kept going through that pile. Electric bill past due, water bill 2 months behind, a notice from Mama's supplemental insurance I didn't even want to read. And then, near the bottom of that pile, I found something that stopped me cold. A bank statement. Chesapeake National Bank. I had never heard of Chesapeake National Bank in connection with my mother. Mama had banked at Liberty Federal Credit Union since 1971. I knew every account she had. I'd helped her open most of them. This was not one of them. I opened the statement. Joint checking account. 2 names printed at the top. Ernestine Walker, and right below it, Paulette Walker Sims, my sister's name, on a bank account I had never seen, at a bank my mother had never used. I looked at the balance. $11.43. I looked at my mother in the next room, shivering in 2 coats in her own house. Then I looked at that statement again. Polly's name. $11.43, and a transaction history I couldn't make sense of. Not yet, not standing there in that cold kitchen with my hands shaking and my heart beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know what I was looking at. Not yet, not the whole picture, but I knew what I was feeling, and it was the same feeling I'd get on my mail route when a dog was watching me from behind a fence, and the hair on the back of my neck would stand up before my brain could tell me why. Something was wrong. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. And standing in my mother's freezing kitchen with that bank statement in my hand, I was just beginning to understand how wrong it was. I stood there staring at that statement for a long time. Polly's name, Chesapeake National Bank. My mother didn't bank at Chesapeake National. She'd never banked there. She'd been at Liberty Federal Credit Union since 1971, and she was a creature of habit in all things. She didn't switch banks. She didn't open new accounts. And she certainly didn't open a joint checking account with anybody without telling me about it, because I was the one she called every time she needed to sign anything financial for the last 20 years. Polly put her name on this account. Polly, who told me every week that everything was fine. Polly, who waved me off every time I asked about the bills. Polly, who said, "You worry too much, Gloria," with that patient little smile, while my mother sat in the next room in 2 coats because nobody had paid a $147 gas bill. I folded that statement and put it in my purse. I didn't call Polly. That was the first decision I made, and it was the most important one. A younger version of me would have picked up the phone right then and there, voice shaking, demanding answers. But I was 65 years old. I had spent 37 years delivering mail in every neighborhood in West Baltimore. And if you do that job long enough, you learn something about people. You learn that when somebody is hiding something, the worst thing you can do is let them know you're looking, because the moment they know, the evidence disappears, the receipts get shredded, the story gets rehearsed. I wasn't going to give my sister that chance. I walked back into the living room. Mama was still in her recliner, still shivering. I pulled the quilt off the back of the couch and tucked it around her legs. I kissed her forehead and I told her I was going to get the heat turned back on. And I would. But first, I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't that freezing house with its pile of unopened bills and its one bank statement that was already burning a hole through the lining of my purse. I walked out the front door and down the steps, and that's when I heard her voice. "Gloria, come sit with me a minute." Miss Odessa Pruitt was on her porch in February, 80 years old, wrapped in a heavy wool coat, with a blanket across her knees and a mug of something hot between her hands. She'd been watching me walk up to Mama's house every Sunday for 4 years, and she'd been watching my sister do whatever she'd been doing every other day of the week. Miss Odessa saw everything on Ashland Avenue. She always had. The difference was she never said a word about any of it. That was her way. She didn't put her nose in other people's family business. That was the rule in her generation, and she lived by it until that day. I climbed her porch steps and sat down in the rocking chair next to hers. My legs were shaking, but I sat down. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me with those clear brown eyes, the kind of eyes that don't miss a thing, and she took a slow sip from her mug. Miss Odessa had buried a husband and 2 sons and never once asked anybody for pity. She was the kind of woman who kept her own counsel. So when she finally opened her mouth, I knew it had cost her something to do it. "Baby, I know I should have said something sooner. It wasn't my place and I know that, but I can't sit here and watch this anymore." "Watch what, Miss Odessa?" She set the mug down on the railing. "Your sister has been coming to that house damn near every day for 4 years. And I sit right here, Gloria, right here in this chair. I see who comes and who goes. I see what they carry in and what they carry out." She paused. "Your sister doesn't bring groceries. She doesn't bring meals. She doesn't bring medicine. She brings envelopes, manila envelopes, white envelopes, big envelopes, little envelopes. She goes in with them and she comes out without them. And every time she leaves, she's smiling like she just won the number." My stomach dropped, but I didn't interrupt her. "Last October," Miss Odessa said, "your mama came out on that porch in her nightgown at 6 a.m, confused, crying. Said she couldn't find her checkbook. Polly came and took her back inside. Next day, I could see right through the front window into the living room. Your mama was sitting at that table signing papers, one after another. And she didn't even have her glasses on, Gloria. She couldn't see what she was signing. I sat in that rocking chair, and I didn't move. The wind was blowing down Ashland Avenue, and I could feel it on my face, but I couldn't feel anything else. Everything Miss Odessa was telling me fit. It fit with the cold house and the empty refrigerator and the dead batteries and the canned soup in the pantry. It fit with the $147 gas bill nobody paid. It fit with the bank statement in my purse. Every small thing I'd noticed in 4 years of Sunday visits and talked myself out of worrying about, every single one snapped into place like a row of buttons on one of Mama's dresses. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't Polly being overwhelmed or in over her head. My sister had been coming to that house every day for 4 years, and she hadn't been taking care of Mama. She'd been taking care of business, her business, and my mother was the bank. I thanked Miss Odessa. I held her hand for a moment and squeezed it, and I thanked her for telling me the truth. Then I went home, and I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my own kitchen table, and I thought about every time Polly had said, "I got it, Gloria." Every wave of the hand, every patient smile. She wasn't managing Mama's care. She was managing me, keeping me just far enough away to not see what she was doing. Monday morning, I drove to Liberty Federal Credit Union. Now, I need you to understand something. When Mama opened that first savings account in 1971, I was there. I helped her fill out the paperwork. I was her co-signer on that account because that's how we did it in our family, how a lot of working families did it back then. You put your daughter's name on the account, so if anything happened to you, somebody could get to the money without a judge getting involved. I'd been on that account for over 30 years. I had every right to walk in there and ask questions, and that's exactly what I did. The branch manager was a woman named Deborah who'd been working that branch since the 80s. She recognized me the moment I sat down across from her desk. I told her I needed to see the current status of my mother's accounts, all of them. She typed something into her computer and then her face changed. I watched it happen. It went from polite to concerned to something that looked a lot like dread. Mama's savings account, the one she'd had since 1971, had a balance of $340. $340 out of $280,000. I didn't cry. I wanted to. I could feel it in my chest, that hot, tight feeling, but I didn't cry. I asked Deborah to keep going. The 3 certificates of deposit totaling $85,000 had all been cashed out early, every one of them. Penalties paid, which meant somebody wanted the money badly enough to take the loss. The investment account, $62,000, had been liquidated in March of 2000. Deborah slid a box of tissues across her desk. I didn't touch it. I wasn't there to cry. I was there to understand what had happened to my mother's money. And crying wasn't going to tell me that. I said, I need paper copies of every transaction on every one of those accounts going back to January of 1998. Deborah said it would take 2 or 3 days to pull and print the archived records. I gave her my phone number. I drove home and I waited. Those were the longest 3 days of my life. I went to work on Mama's heat called BGE, paid the $147 myself, made sure the furnace came back on. I bought groceries and filled that refrigerator the way it used to be. I sat with Mama on Tuesday evening and watched her eat a real meal for the first time in God knows how long, and I didn't say a word about what I knew. Not to Mama, not to Polly, not to anyone. I just waited. Thursday afternoon, Deborah called. The records were ready. I picked them up that evening. A thick stack of printed paper in a manila envelope, 4 years of transactions, every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer, every check that had cleared through Mama's accounts from 1998 to February of 2002. I held that envelope in my hands in the credit union parking lot, and I thought about opening it right there. But I didn't. I knew I needed help. I could read a bank statement, but I couldn't trace where the money went. I needed somebody who could follow the numbers, somebody I trusted. I called my nephew, Dante Harris, that night. Dante was my late brother Earl's son, 35 years old, quiet as a church mouse and twice as precise. He worked as an accountant at a small firm downtown, did people's taxes, balanced their books, ran their numbers. He wasn't a forensic specialist or any kind of investigator. He was just a man who understood money on paper, and he was family. I called him on the landline and I said, Dante, I need you to look at something for me. I can't tell you what it is on the phone. I need you to see it. He said, come by Saturday morning, Auntie Gloria. Saturday morning, I drove to Dante's apartment in Park Heights. with that manila envelope on the passenger seat. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and didn't ask any questions. He just cleared his dining room table and said, "Show me." I handed him the stack. He spread those papers out across that table like a surgeon laying out instruments. 4 years of transactions, fanned across the wood in neat rows. He sat down with a calculator, a legal pad, and a pen, and he started working. He worked all day Saturday. He worked all day Sunday. I went home and waited. Dante called me Sunday evening and said, "Auntie Gloria, you need to come back over here." I drove back to Park Heights. When I walked in, the dining room table looked like a crime scene. Papers everywhere, sorted into piles, columns of numbers running down the legal pad in Dante's small, careful handwriting, red circles around certain entries, sticky notes marking specific checks, and Dante sitting in his chair with his calculator still in his hand and an expression on his face I'd never seen before. He walked me through it, pile by pile, $47,000, written in checks to Morgan State University, tuition and housing for Polly's twins, Janelle and Jerome, 4 years of payments, pulled directly from Mama's savings, $72,000, paid to the Internal Revenue Service in installment payments. Vernon's tax debt from that failed used car lot, paid off with my mother's money. Every single payment traceable right there in the check payees on Mama's account. $28,000. Mortgage payments sent to Chesapeake National Bank, Polly and Vernon's mortgage, paid month after month from an 87-year-old woman's savings. $15,000. One check to a car dealership on Bel Air Road, a Buick LeSabre, purchased in cash, titled to Vernon Sims. My mother, who didn't drive anymore, bought Vernon a car and never knew it. $34,000. Payments to 6 different credit card companies. Polly and Vernon's personal credit card debt wiped clean with Mama's money, and then the rest. Approximately $53,000 in ATM withdrawals and cash, just gone, pulled out of machines and spent on whatever they wanted. Another $19,000 or so in transfers that eventually disappeared into cash. Roughly $72,000 total that Dante couldn't trace to a specific destination. "That money's just gone, Auntie Gloria," he said. "It went into their pockets and out into the world. Restaurants, clothes, vacations. I can't tell you exactly where, but I can tell you it didn't go to Mama." He put his calculator down, and he looked at me across that table covered in 4 years of my mother's stolen life. And he said, "Auntie Gloria, this wasn't borrowing, this was a budget. She had a system." A system. My sister had a system for stealing from our mother. I sat in Dante's dining room and I added up the numbers in my head. $268,000. Out of the $280,000 that Mama had spent 45 years earning, stitch by stitch, hem by hem, one dress at a time. $268,000 gone, distributed across tuition bills and tax debts and car payments and credit cards and cash that vanished into thin air. All of it taken by the daughter who'd sat at my kitchen table and cried and said, "Let me take care of Mama." I looked at those papers spread across Dante's table, and for a long time, I didn't say anything. Dante didn't rush me. He just sat there quiet, letting me take it in, and slowly I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness, not anymore. Something colder, something that had edges. I had spent 4 years trusting my sister with the most important thing in the world, and she had used that trust like a blank check. She built a budget out of Mama's life savings and funded her entire family's expenses while our mother shivered in a cold house and signed papers she couldn't read without her glasses. I didn't know yet about the signature cards. I didn't know about the dates or the survivorship rights or how deep the planning really went. That was all coming, and when it came, it would be worse than anything I'd imagined sitting at that table. But on a Sunday night in February of 2002, in my nephew's apartment in Park Heights, with the radiator clicking and those papers spread out like a map of my sister's betrayal, I knew enough. I knew the scope. I knew the method. I knew where the money went. And I knew that Dante's papers, those careful columns of numbers in his neat handwriting, were something more than an accounting exercise. They were evidence, and Polly had no idea I had them. I was going to need a lawyer. Mr. Clyde Bradshaw was 70 years old, semi-retired, and still kept an office on Garrison Boulevard with wood-paneled walls and a fax machine he refused to replace. He knew every judge in Baltimore County, and he owed me a favor from our postal union days. I called him Monday morning and said, Clyde, I need to see you today. He said, "Nee, Ma, come on down, Gloria." I brought everything. Dante's legal pad, the Liberty Federal Records, the Chesapeake National Statement from Mama's mail pile. Bradshaw put on his reading glasses and went through it page by page without saying a word. When he finished, he took off his glasses and set them on the desk. "Gloria, what your sister did is a crime. We can go civil, criminal, or both. But first I need to see what's inside that Chesapeake National account. That's her bank, not your mother's. Whatever she set up there is the key." He took the case pro bono, said the favor was long overdue. Then he filed a pre-suit discovery petition with the court, citing suspected elder financial abuse. "We don't need a full lawsuit yet," he told me. "Maryland law lets me petition for emergency discovery when there's probable cause of exploitation. A judge will order the bank to hand over the records." 2.5 weeks later, the documents arrived. I sat across from Bradshaw while he opened the envelope. Signature cards, joint checking and joint savings at Chesapeake National, my mother's name and Polly's name, side by side. The date on both cards was October 14th, 1997. I stared at that date. The family meeting where we gave Polly power of attorney was November 5th, 1997. I remember because it was the day after Election Day, and Cheryl had complained about the traffic from Atlanta. 3 weeks. Polly had taken Mama to that bank 3 weeks before we ever sat down at my kitchen table to discuss who would manage Mama's affairs. Before she volunteered, before she cried, before she said, let me take care of Mama. And there was more. Both accounts had survivorship rights. Bradshaw explained what that meant. When Mama died, everything in those accounts would transfer to Polly automatically. No probate, no court, no family notification. None of us would ever have known. Bradshaw leaned back in his chair. "Gloria, your sister didn't decide to steal from your mother. She planned it. She set up the getaway car before she committed the robbery." Dante had called it a system. It was worse than a system. It was premeditated. I went to see Mama that Wednesday. Curtis had asked me during our regular phone call to check on her midweek, and I'm glad he did. When I walked in, Mama was at her kitchen table with her glasses on and her eyes clear. A good day. She knew my name. She knew what day it was. I sat down and held her hand and asked, as gently as I knew how, "Mama, do you remember going to a bank with Polly, signing some papers?" Something moved behind her eyes. Not confusion, memory. "She said it was for Jerome's birthday," Mama said. "I signed the card. She was in such a hurry." A birthday card. My mother thought she was signing a birthday card for her grandson. Then Mama gripped my hand hard and whispered, "Baby, where's my checkbook? Polly said she'd bring it back." My mother had been a seamstress for 45 years. She could thread a needle with her eyes half closed, but she couldn't see what her own daughter was doing with a pen and a signature card. 2 days later, I ran into Vernon at the Rite Aid on Liberty Heights. He was buying cigars, relaxed, no idea in the world that I knew anything. His face lit up. "Gloria, your sister is a saint, taking care of your mama and putting 2 kids through college. I don't know how she does it." He laughed, patted my shoulder, and walked out. I stood in that aisle and didn't move. He just told me exactly where the money went, and he didn't even realize what he'd said. The next morning, I drove to Polly's house. I told myself I was giving her one last chance to look me in the eye and tell the truth before the lawyers took over. I was her big sister. I owed it to the girls we used to be to try. I sat at her kitchen table and put the records down, every page. Dante's analysis, the Liberty Federal statements, the signature cards, all of it spread between us. Polly looked at those papers. I watched her face go through 5 things in 10 seconds, surprise, then fear, then something calculating, then annoyance, and then that smile, that patient little smile. "Gloria," she said, "Mama doesn't even know what day it is. She doesn't need that money. My children need an education." What was she going to do with it? Take it to the grave. I'm the one who bathes her. I'm the one who wipes her chin. Where were you? I was at her house every Sunday, Polly. You know that. She leaned forward. Sundays. You came on Sundays. I was there every single day. Feeding her, cleaning her, listening to her call me by Daddy's name because she doesn't know who I am anymore. Her eyes were hard and dry. That money is my payment, Gloria. I earned it. $268,000. My sister called it her payment. Vernon walked in from the back room. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. "Gloria, be reasonable. The money's spent. The kids are in school. What are you going to do? Uneducate them?" I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I gathered every piece of paper off that table and said, "I'm going to do what Mama taught us, Polly. I'm going to make sure every stitch holds." I walked out the front door, and as I came down the porch steps, I heard Vernon's voice through the screen door. He was on the phone, and he said it like it was just another item on a list. "That house on Ashland is worth at least $90,000, Mama's house. The house she'd paid off in 1984, the house where she raised 5 children alone after Daddy died at Bethlehem still. The money wasn't enough. They wanted the house too." I drove to Bradshaw's office. I told him everything. Polly's words, Vernon's words, what I'd overheard through the screen door. Bradshaw listened, and then he said, "Gloria, we need to move. Financial crimes have filing windows. If Vernon is already looking at the house, we can't afford to be slow." I sat in that wood-paneled office, and I thought about the girl who held my hand so tight at Daddy's funeral that I had bruises for a week. I thought about the woman who called $268,000 stolen dollars her payment. They weren't the same person. I just hadn't known it until now. "File everything," I said. "Whatever it takes. I'm done waiting." Bradshaw picked up his pen, and something inside me went quiet. Not broken, not angry, just finished. The way a door sounds when it closes for the last time. I called Cheryl in Atlanta that night. She said, "I'll make it up. Gloria, I can't get in the middle of this." Donnie was deployed somewhere in the Pacific and hadn't returned my last 2 messages. Earl Jr. had been in the ground since '99. I was alone, and Polly knew it. She'd already gone to work at Mount Calvary Baptist, telling anyone who'd listen that I was jealous, that I was trying to take Mama away from her, that I'd always resented her for being the baby. She built that lie, the same way she built everything, with a smile and a casserole dish. Pastor Gaines called me on a Tuesday evening. He said he ruled through us. "Sister Gloria, I know family matters can be painful, but Polly is a good Christian woman. Don't tear this family apart over money." I thanked him for calling. Then I called Bradshaw. "File it," I said. "Today." Bradshaw filed the civil suit the next morning. Walker versus Walker Sims, Baltimore County Circuit Court, and the process server found Polly exactly where she always was on Sunday, in the 3rd pew at Mount Calvary Baptist with her Bible under her arm. She was reaching for her hymnal when he handed her the papers. She dropped it. The whole congregation heard it hit the floor. Polly hired a lawyer named Kevin Price. Young man confident, thought there were assets worth defending. His strategy was simple. Mama gave the money willingly. Polly was her caretaker, and the money was compensation for 4 years of sacrifice. Then Polly produced a letter, handwritten, dated March of 1999, supposedly from Mama, authorizing Polly to use my savings for family needs as she sees fit. The handwriting was neat, too neat. It looked like calligraphy. I remembered what Mama always said about Polly's penmanship, how it looked like calligraphy, how she was so proud of it. Bradshaw didn't panic. He subpoenaed Dr. Lennox's medical records through civil discovery. When those records arrived, the letter was dead. By March of 1999, Mama could not manage her own finances, could not understand legal documents, could not sign her own name consistently. That letter was either forged or signed by a woman who had no idea what the words meant. The deposition was held in a conference room downtown. Polly sat across from Bradshaw with Kevin Price beside her. Vernon sat in the back row as co-defendant. Bradshaw started with the signature cards. Mrs. Sims, these accounts at Chesapeake National were opened October 14th, 1997. The family meeting where you were granted power of attorney was November 5th, 3 weeks later. Can you explain why these accounts existed before you had legal authority? Polly looked at Kevin Price, then back at Bradshaw. I don't remember the exact dates. You don't remember taking your 87-year-old mother to a bank 3 weeks before you volunteered to care for her? Kevin Price objected. Bradshaw moved on, but he wasn't finished. Mrs. Sims, at the time you opened these accounts, is it true that you and your husband owed the Internal Revenue Service approximately $72,000 from a failed business on Pulaski Highway? The room changed. Polly went pale. Kevin Price called for a break, and Vernon, sitting in the back of that room, stood up and walked out. Didn't say a word, just left. During discovery, Bradshaw subpoenaed their financial records. The truth was worse than I expected. Polly and Vernon were penniless. The $268,000 was gone. Every dollar. The house had a second mortgage. The Buick was being repossessed. Vernon owed another $14,000 to a creditor in Delaware. The twins' tuition was paid through the semester, and that was it. Bradshaw sat me down in his office. Gloria, I have to be honest. Even when we win this civil case, and we will win, a judgment against people with nothing is a piece of paper. You can't get blood from a stone. I sat there for a long moment. Then I said, then let's get the stone locked up. Bradshaw had told me months ago that what Polly did could be criminal. Now I told him to make it criminal. He prepared the referral package himself. Bank records, signature cards, Dr. Lennox medical records, Dante's financial analysis, Miss Odessa's sworn statement, the forged letter and samples of Mama's real handwriting. Everything bound and indexed, delivered to the Baltimore County District Attorney's Office. They assigned a young prosecutor named Monica Cartwright. She read the file in 2 days and called Bradshaw directly. The grand jury returned an indictment within the month. Arrest warrants issued for both of them. Polly was arrested at her home on a Thursday evening in September of 2002. 2 detectives, handcuffs. Vernon was picked up the same night at his brother's house in Dundalk. The charges were felony theft over $100,000, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, and conspiracy. Polly made bail. The house, second mortgage and all, was enough collateral. Vernon couldn't post. He stayed in. She called me that night from her kitchen. I could hear it in her voice, the shaking, the disbelief that this was actually happening to her. Gloria, please, I'm your sister. Don't do this. Think of the twins. Think of the family. I am thinking of the family, Polly. I'm thinking of Mama. She was still talking when I hung up the phone. The trial was set for early 2003. Months passed. I didn't sleep well, but I didn't waver either. Baltimore County Circuit Court, Judge Martha Tate presiding. 3 days. I testified first. I told them everything. The cold house in February, the bank statement in the mail pile, the $11.43, Miss Odessa's porch, the credit union, Dante's dining room table, the signature cards, all of it from the beginning. Dante took the stand next. He walked the jury through every dollar with the same legal pad he'd used at his dining room table. $47,000 to Morgan State, $72,000 to the IRS, $28,000 to the mortgage, $15,000 for a Buick, $34,000 to credit cards, the rest untraceable. He looked at the jury and said, this wasn't borrowing, this was a budget. Then Miss Odessa, 80 years old. She walked into that courtroom with her cane, sat down in the witness chair, and told those 12 people exactly what she'd seen from her porch for 4 years. The envelopes, the missing groceries, Mama wandering in her nightgown at 6 a.m, Mama signing papers at the kitchen table without her glasses. Miss Odessa spoke slowly, clearly, and she never looked away from the jury once. Dr. Lennox testified about Mama's condition. By March of 1999, his clinical notes were explicit. She could not manage finances. She could not understand legal documents. The authorization letter Polly produced was either forged or meaningless. A representative from Chesapeake National Bank authenticated the signature cards. October 14, 1997, joint accounts, survivorship rights, Mama's signature, shaky and barely legible, next to Polly's. Then Polly took the stand. Kevin Price had her in a modest navy dress, no jewelry. She cried. She talked about bathing Mama, changing her sheets, sitting with her through the nights when she was confused and frightened. She said no one helped her. She said no one understood what it cost her. She said she deserved something for her sacrifice. The jury watched her. I watched her, and I remember sitting at her kitchen table, the way she smiled when she said Mama didn't need that money, the way she said it was her payment, the way her eyes were hard and dry. Monica Cartwright stood up for cross-examination. She was calm. She picked up a single document from the prosecution table and held it where the jury could see it. Mrs. Sims, I'm holding the signature card for the joint checking account at Chesapeake National Bank. It is dated October 14th, 1997. Your family's meeting to discuss your mother's care was November 5th, 1997. 3 weeks later. She paused. If caring for your mother was such a sacrifice, why did you set up these accounts 3 weeks before you even agreed to do it? The courtroom went still. Kevin Price didn't object. Polly opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She looked at the jury. She looked at her lawyer. She looked at me. No answer, no excuse, no calligraphy neat enough to cover what that date meant. The silence in that courtroom was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The jury came back in under 2 hours. Guilty on all counts, both defendants, felony theft, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, conspiracy. Every charge confirmed by 12 people who sat in that courtroom and listened. Judge Tate sentenced Polly to 10 years in state prison, parole eligible after 6. Vernon received 5 years, $268,000 in restitution ordered against both of them jointly. That amount would follow them for the rest of their lives. Then Judge Tate looked at my sister and spoke from the bench. Mrs. Sims, your mother spent 45 years earning that money one stitch at a time. You spent 4 years stealing it one signature at a time. She built something. You just took. Polly didn't move. They led her out through the side door in handcuffs. The women from Mount Calvary Baptist were sitting in the gallery, the same row where Polly used to sing. They watched her go. Vernon was taken out after her. He never looked back. I sat in that courtroom after everyone left. Bradshaw touched my shoulder and said he'd call me tomorrow. Then it was just me in an empty room where the hardest thing I'd ever done had finally been finished. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my knees and breathed, just breathed. The tears came then, quiet and slow. Not the kind you fight, but the kind that come when you stop fighting. I let them. Bradshaw filed the guardianship petition the following week. 3 weeks later, a judge granted me full legal guardianship and formally revoked the power of attorney. I packed what I needed from a row house in Edmondson Village and moved into Mama's house on Ashland Avenue, the house she paid off in 1984. New heater installed the first day. Downstairs bedroom converted for her care. Fresh sheets, gardenias on the nightstand. They found scattered accounts Polly hadn't drained, pension and Social Security deposits she'd missed. $11,200. It went into a trust for Mama's care. Pastor Gaines came to the door with a casserole dish and a face full of shame. He said, Sister Gloria, I owe you an apology. I listened to the wrong person. I took the casserole. The women's ministry organized a rotating schedule after that. someone sitting with Mama every afternoon so I could rest. Miss Odessa walked over every morning with 2 cups of tea and the newspaper, except now I was the one sitting across from her at Mama's kitchen table. Curtis started driving down from Philadelphia every other weekend instead of once a month. He'd sit with Mom in the living room and read her the paper, same as always. And one afternoon, she looked up at him with eyes so clear, it stopped me in the doorway. She said, you look just like your grandfather. Curtis put the newspaper down and cried. I let him. Some things you don't interrupt. Janelle called 6 months after the trial, crying before she finished saying my name. She said she didn't know where the tuition money came from. I told her, baby, you didn't steal anything, but now you know what it costs. Go finish your degree, and when you get that diploma, you remember whose money paid for it. Jerome never called. 8 months into her sentence, Polly sent me a letter. 3 pages, half apology, half justification. The last line read, you could have handled this as a family, Gloria. You didn't have to go to the law. I read it at Mama's kitchen table. I folded it up. I didn't write back. I put on my coat, walked next door, and sat on Miss Odessa's porch in the cold December air. She said, you all right, baby? I said, she still thinks she's the victim. Miss Odessa nodded slowly. They always do. By spring of 2003, the garden was alive again. I'd been tending it since I moved in, turning soil, planting the things Mama always loved. On a warm afternoon in April, I brought her outside and set her in the chair by the flower bed, wrapped in a blanket. The gardenias were blooming. She sat there for a long time, watching the light move through the leaves. Then she reached out and touched one of the blossoms. She turned to me with a clarity I hadn't seen in months and said, thank you for taking care of my flowers, baby. I held my mother's hand. She wasn't talking about flowers. Mama couldn't remember my name most days, but she remembered what mattered. She remembered that someone was taking care of something she loved, and I thought about what she told me once, back when she still had all her words. Gloria, a stitch you skip today is a seam that tears tomorrow. Polly skipped the stitch. She thought nobody would notice, but I'm a Walker woman. We check every seam. And when something's torn, we don't pretend it's whole. We fix it, or we cut it loose. I was 65 years old when I sat in that courtroom. Some people would say that's too old to fight, but I say that's exactly old enough to know what's worth fighting for.